Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Creative Cast. I am so excited that you guys are joining me today. And today we're going to be talking all about how to monetize your podcast, how to bring in some revenue. Now, I know that a lot of you did not get into podcasting just for the money. Maybe some of you did. But before we get into all of the ways that you can monetize your podcast, I just want to say happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. I know the majority of my audience is women, but I know we do have a few gentlemen out there. And if you are a dad, so happy Father's Day to all the dads out there and all the moms who are doing double duty for one reason or another. There's a lot to talk about today. So let's just jump right in. Now, there are several ways that you can monetize a podcast, whether it's direct or indirect. So one of the latest trends in creating revenue for your podcast is by creating paid membership tiers. Now, I've talked a little bit about this with some of the Apple podcast news and Spotify news, and we'll get into the specifics of that in just a second. Now, what is this whole paid membership tiers or subscriber-based content? So basically, listeners can pay to access exclusive content, whether it's private Facebook groups or podcast swag. And the reason why this works is because since you already know that your audience likes to listen to your podcast, there's a really good chance that some of them, not all of them, we would love for all of them to do this, right? But some of them will be willing to pay for premium versions of your content. Now, all you have to do with that, so you're already creating your podcast, whether it's a weekly or a every 2-week show or monthly show, whatever the frequency is, all you have to do is create a little bit additional unique content that is available only for purchase. So you could do a Q&A with your guest, or even a deeper dive Q&A with the guest that maybe you have on your For the Public show. You could do early access to episodes that may be free a week later, especially if you're doing a high profile guest. There's lots of ways to do that. You could do ad-free episodes. I know there is several podcasts that are using that revenue so that you're not exposed to any of the ads or anything like that. And there's also live stream episodes. Now, the one that is really taking the most unique approach to this type of premium content is the Daily Wire. Now, for $10 a month, which is relatively really cheap, subscribers can get access to the video versions of their podcast episode. That is one of the most unique ways that I have seen people utilizing podcast-related content in a much different way. Now, the easiest way to create this premium content, of course, is record it when you record your free stuff, right? So let's say you invite a guest on your show. You're going to record a 30-minute conversation between you and the guest, and that's going to be your public version of your podcast. But also record an additional 10 minutes to sell as a bonus episode that they only get access to if they are a subscriber of the premium content. So make sure that the extra 10 minutes includes something really juicy or maybe controversial or whatever you think is going to bring people in to buy that additional content. A word of warning here, y'all. I want you to make sure that your free stuff still has plenty of value. You don't want your listeners to assume you're hiding all the good things in the paid content, or they won't bother. One of the best ways that I found to do this subscriber-based content is to get started using Patreon. Patreon is a well-respected, simple to use platform. They've been around for 8 years, I think since 2013. They have default settings of the different tiers that you can do, and you can certainly just use those. Or you can create your own system of different levels and rewards for your donors. So if you go with Patreon, I want you to play around with those different level options, do some research, ask your audience, send out a survey. You should be doing that regardless of whether you're going to do a Patreon account or not. you can reward your audience for their contributions with swag, other types of content, different perks. You're going to find more listeners are willing to support your show because they are receiving either a physical product or exclusive episodes for their contribution. For example, I have a client that uses Patreon to pay for their ministry expenses. This includes their podcast editing, me, and other sound editing and tech needs that they have locally. This type of thing is quickly becoming the preferred revenue model for many podcasters because it doesn't come with some of the sponsorship issues, which I will get to in just a moment. So if you didn't want to use Patreon, there are other options out there. There's Glow.fm, there's Supercast, and Memberful. I'm sure there's several, but those are the other ones that I recommend if you're not going to use Patreon. What about the Apple podcast subscription and the Spotify subscription? Here's my take on this. Now, Spotify is free until 2023, but you need Anchor in order to utilize it. And right now, they're choosing very specific podcasts. A lot of them are celebrity podcasts in order to have one of those spots. Again, you need to have an Anchor account in order to do it. I'm not a big fan of Anchor as a podcast host. If you already have an Anchor account, the Spotify version of this is going to be free until 2023. And then I think they said they're going to charge between 8 to 10% is going to be their cut. Now, the other entry into the game with this is Apple Podcasts. I love Apple. I love all things Apple. I have multiple Apple devices. I'm recording this on an Apple device. I am not recommending Apple Podcasts for your subscription-based model. And the reason for that is they are going to take 30% off the top. That's a lot of money. I think you could utilize Patreon, and I think the lowest price point is 3%, and I think it goes up to 12%. It's been around much longer, so that's my take on the subscription-based model. I really, really like this type of model, and I'm recommending it to all of my clients. Now let's talk about sponsorships. It's another way to bring in revenue, and up until recently, it's really been the most common way to monetize a podcast. So aside from accepting donations or using the subscription-based revenue model, sponsorship is the easiest because you don't have to create anything extra. You don't have to sell anything. All you got to do is set up a deal with a sponsor. Easy peasy, right? Okay, now we've all heard of sponsorships on podcasts. They'll start the show with this episode is sponsored by. You get the idea. That's sponsorship. Like I said, easy peasy. To a certain extent, it brings some other issues that I don't think a lot of people think about. Because brands who want to sponsor podcasts are going to pay more depending on how many people listen to your show. As the number of people who listen increases, so will your revenue. But that also means that it's a challenging way to make money for your podcast if you don't have a lot of listeners. And then there's some programs where you can get set up with sponsors. I know Spotify has a thing where you can do that, but it's all based on your downloads and what your stats and metrics are telling you. Like, for example, Libsyn, in order to even be considered for the program, you have to have 5,000 downloads per episode over 30 days. The average podcast is not going to be there, especially right out the gate, unless you're a celebrity, you've already got that following, or you just got a really, really good podcast that people are just absolutely loving. Generally, for sponsorships, you can charge for pre-roll or mid-roll. Pre-roll is usually at the very beginning of the show. There may be like a small introduction, then there's the ad, and then there is the meat of the show. Where mid-roll is literally in the middle of your podcast. You could do a sponsorship at both points if you're comfortable. It just kind of depends on what you want. Remember, if you're taking payments from anyone, you have an obligation to them. They are paying you for a service. You need to deliver that service, and you want to keep your sponsor clients happy. Now, maybe up to now, your podcast has just been a hobby. You didn't really anticipate doing any kind of revenue with it. It is just an extension of your business or an extension of your brand. And you maybe been able to miss the odd week. You kind of phoned in the episode, or you just didn't feel like hitting record, so you just skipped a week. I don't recommend this, by the way. But let's just say you did. That changes completely when someone has paid to advertise on your show, especially if those ads are time sensitive. So I want you to take all of this into consideration before deciding if that is the route that you want to go with. A lot of people think it's easier because you don't have to create anything extra, you don't have to do anything, but you really have to make sure that your downloads are there and they stay consistent. Because a sponsorship could go, you know what? We've looked at the last 30 days. We're not getting the kind of ROI on this that we anticipated. We're done, or done at the end of their contract. So really want you to look at this and see if that's something that you want to do. The other thing with sponsorships, you could also do affiliate sponsorships, where you say, oh, if you're looking for a great CBD gummy, you can go here and use my code or follow this link. That's always an option to bring in a little extra revenue. Just make sure it is meeting your target market for your podcast. For example, I would not sell gummies on the show because it's a show about podcasting. It would not make any sense for me to do that. So you want to make sure that you're staying in line with what you're talking about, what your show's about, all these kinds of things. Okay, so what are some other ways that you can monetize your podcast? Well, one of them is join an advertising network. Now, there's advertising networks like AdvertiseCast, Midroll, Popcorn, Podgrid, and basically they act as middlemen between hosts and sponsors. And Libsyn has a program as well. So when you apply to each program, they basically take a cut of the ad placements included in your show. So please make sure to read that fine print. I have consulted with so many different clients that they didn't read the fine print and it did not work out well for them. So now the network, like I said, they take a cut from the ad placements. So typically the revenue share follows a CPM model. Basically, you're paid for every 1,000 impressions served to the ad unit. Are you confused? Okay, let me break this down a little bit for you. So basically, what the math boils down to on AdvertiseCast, they have a 70-30% revenue share model where the podcast host takes 70% of the revenue earned and they take the other 30%. So depending on your reach, it's crucial to estimate what you might earn from an advertising network. AdvertiseCast does have a pricing calculator that kind of calculates the total cost of ad units placed in your show. So just remember, you're only going to be taking home 70% of that total. Now, another way to monetize your show is to syndicate it on YouTube. And it's really an easy way to make revenue on already produced content. Now, are you going to make a lot of money? Just depends on your content, just depends on a lot of different factors. But it is one of the easiest ways to do that. And all you got to do is just basically take your existing podcast and put it on YouTube. And it's a relatively quick process. So you have to go over to YouTube, enable monetization in your account settings, and pretty much Google takes care of handling the ads and distributing the money to you. So the thing that I like about this the most is that even though YouTube is not a music platform, it's a popular site for people to listen to audio-based content. And I think the last time I looked at the numbers, YouTube attracted 47% of all music streaming listening time around the world. So it really makes it a very powerful tool for podcast syndication. So how does this whole YouTube republishing work? Well, since YouTube only accepts video files, you're going to need to convert your episode audio file, which generally is MP3, and turn it into a video file. So basically, you're going to add some visual element like a static image and then upload. So basically think like almost like an audiogram, but much longer than that. The other thing that you could do is you could also live stream your podcast recording while you're doing it to YouTube simultaneously through YouTube and Facebook Live and Instagram Live. And there's lots of different ways that you can do that. There's some of the ways that you can monetize your podcast. Like I said, my number one tip for you is try the subscription-based content because you've already got the audience. They're already listening to your show. I would say probably 50 to 60% of your audience will take advantage of that. So there's lots of ways that you can monetize your show. The other thing I wanted to mention, and this is really important. Here's some recent news, and it's all about Facebook. I told you guys on previous episodes that there was something coming with Facebook. Well, they confirmed it last week. Facebook is building an in-app podcast player. Now, this is going to be different from its new in-app Spotify player. So podcasters will be able to distribute, as a podcaster, you will be able to distribute your show through your Facebook page. And you're going to need to opt in into doing this. Now, the exact details are still kind of fuzzy. They haven't released anything specific. This is all going to work through your RSS feed, or creators will have a back-end way to upload their content directly to Facebook. Now, according to a Facebook blog post, this functionality is expected to roll out within a few months. So that's about as clear as mud, right? So as soon as I know, I will let you guys know. I want you guys to make sure that you tune in to next week's show because I'm having my first guest on the Creative Cast podcast. It is my friend and queen of TikToks and keeping it real in the reels, Ashley Henriette of Motherhood Unfiltered. Now, if you've never seen Ashley, this girl is hilarious. So I'm so excited. She's going to be on the show next week. We are going to talk about how she got started, TikToks, Instagram, motherhood, and of course, Jesus. Now, if you are interested in being a guest on the Creative Cast and you want to feature your podcast, I would love to hear from you. So go ahead and drop me a line at hello@tammymunsoncreative.com. I have a question. Are you subscribed to the podcast, friend? If not, why? I would love for you to tell all your friends about the show, to subscribe, leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts to help others find out about the show. Now, you can find out more information on exactly how to do this if you don't know how. And that's going to be in the show notes for today's show over on the website. And that's tammymunsoncreative.com/episode 12. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if there's gentlemen listening today, I believe in you. Y'all are my heroes. I believe that inexperience and production fatigue and intimidating tech and new things that are changing in the podcasting world week by week or sometimes day by day, it shouldn't hold you back. So let's walk through this journey together so you can spend less time worrying about the details and more time spreading your message. I hope that you have a great day, and I'll talk to you next Monday. Bye, y'all.